Hello, I'm Matthew Kahn. I'm a professor of economics at the University of Southern California, and it's January 20th, 2026. And I'm very excited because I know I'm about to learn something. I'm with two old friends of mine who I'm going to let introduce themselves. They've started a very interesting big data company, and I'm here to learn. And I briefly want to say something about myself. I'm so old that I remember when Ed Glazer and I used to take city and county data from the city and county data book and type it into a computer to run a regression. And I think what we're about to talk about is how much the world has changed in 35 years and about a very exciting initiative that Anya and Erik are running and getting up and going. And so guys, can I hand it over to you? And can you introduce yourselves and begin to tell us about Placemetry?
Sure. I'm Anya Samek. I'm a Chief Operating Officer at Placemetry and also an Associate Professor at the Rady School of Management at UC San Diego.
And I'm Erik Johnson, CEO of Placemetry and visiting assistant professor at University of California, San Diego. And I should say, Matt, my dissertation was putting in property tax data from Michigan, hand coding it into data as well to run regressions. So I'm
So you're making me feel a
I,
little better.
yes, yes.
So in the old days, finance economists had such a good life. These guys would have daily data like on General Motors stock price, and they would calculate the first difference and they graph that and they test for random walks. And as an urban economist, I was an urban environmental economist. I was frustrated that we had to wait years for census data to come out. The data could be stale, there could be lags, there could be variation between a Beverly Hills versus a Santa Monica, and you might not have data to measure that. And so when I read on LinkedIn about your project, I was so eager to learn about it. So, guys, could I ask you to share your screen because a picture's worth 1,000 words and start to teach me because I'm very eager to learn about what you're creating and I've got a zillion questions and ideas.
Sure. So let me share here. Um, all right. So this is our data rig, and it's three AI powered cameras on top of just any vehicle. So private vehicle here. And what we do is we collect data on the built environment. So this is anything you could see from the street, looking at a house, looking ahead of you, looking to the side. This is street signs, it's debris piles, it's overgrown grass, and it's features of properties. And what we do is as this private vehicle drives around, these cameras collect images of every one of these places. That's why we're placemetry and runs it through AI models to identify features of interest. Like if we have a client who wants to know all the vacant properties or all the properties that need to have their roof repaired in a city, we can do that in a fraction of the time that it used to normally take.
And Anya, how tell me more. So if there's a storm approaching, could you catch either before or after a natural disaster what's going on in real time? Are you sort of taking a thermometer reading of what's going on in a city? Hey, give me help stretch out my imagination here of what you can do with these images.
That's right. So you might be familiar with Google Street View. Google also collects very similar data, but they don't do this on a regular basis. So most properties in a city don't have Google Street View data that's at least that's younger than 5 years old. So this data is old. Our data we can collect in near real time so that you can always have kind of this information about how your city is changing. It's useful for blight, and as you said, it's useful for storm readiness and storm response.
And Erik, from your perspective, what brought you to this? I know you're a PhD. Was this a nerd endeavor, or is I know we live in a big data world. Yes, I'm getting old, but I know the importance of big data. Were you drawn to this from the entrepreneurial possibilities and or the research possibilities?
Yeah, so really I came at it from a research perspective originally. So I was in Alabama and there was a ton of just kind of neglected properties. it's really hot and wet down there, which isn't good for homes. And even on my first trip out there for my academic flyout, I was shocked at the state of housing. It wasn't until I had my own house there that I realized it was just the environment, not necessarily like a lack of interest in keeping houses up that was causing issues. And so when I was in Tuscaloosa, I started out working with the city actually. And I built cameras out of like Raspberry Pis and Arty cams and connected them to the sides of their garbage trucks with magnets. And so they'd go out during the course of the day, be recording data, and then I'd go out there every other day and pull the little SD cards out and run the data through models to do, real basic AI about 5 years ago. And so it's just been a continual progression since then. I should also say, just from a research point of view, you mentioned Ed Glazer, and I'd be remiss. We talked about this the other day. There was an MBR session where Ed and some research assistants and young faculty had started using Street View data to analyze the city with AI using images. And this was a while ago. It must have been like 2016, 2017. And it was so mind-blowing to think that you could actually, because you walk around a city as an urban economist, and what you see kind of tells all these stories that I felt like we were missing. And so being able to actually kind of plug that into models and understand the city visually was really exciting. So I've kind of been on the journey ever since, and really excited to have, as you mentioned, high frequency data we can tell great stories with.
A slightly technical question. So when Susan Athey gives her great lectures on machine learning, she talks about the importance of discriminating that the robot be able to tell a cat from a dog. Can you walk us through how your images, can you give us a high level sense of what your categorizer is seeing as it processes your images?
Sure. Do you want to show this picture?
Is there
Oh,
any
yeah.
analog?
I'm
Is there
showing a
any
picture to
analog?
go along with his description here.
Yes, and Eric, to tee this up, is there any analog to a cat and a dog in cities, or is it a clean versus a dirty garbage bin?
No, absolutely. So what we see in cities, which is really interesting, is every city has different things that they care about. And so to give you an example, in Tuscaloosa, as much as I wanted to transform the city and make it better, talking to the city leaders and actually the COO of the city, what they really cared about, we're talking about storms and all this, was people parking on their front lawn. This was like the thing Tuscaloosa was worried about. And it actually really matters. It wouldn't be something that I would necessarily be concerned about, but it really, really matters because it looks ugly. The neighbors are calling 311. They're spending tons of resources, and it's really easy to remedy, right? So take the car off the front lawn. You don't have to redo a roof. And so that was one of the first models we actually trained was to be able to look at cars on the front lawn. Now, different cities, like I said, care about different things. That's a really kind of fun one, though. And when you're thinking about like high frequency data, it's really important. So if you had a car on your front lawn and I was your neighbor and called 311 and reported you, you may say something like, "Oh, my mother-in-law's in town and she's parking on the front lawn and she's only been here a couple days and blah blah blah." But with this sort of data, you can actually play back the tape and see that that car has been on the lawn for the last 6 months, right? It hasn't moved. You actually have some way to get a ground truth. And so, um, in terms of a Susan Athey story, we can, of course, the AI has gotten really good for detecting a cat or a dog, and it's really prioritized. And do you want to see the cats or do you want to see the dogs? And I think that's one of the really, really fun things. Now, that's not a great, like, super life or world-changing use case, but I think it kind of highlights just the kind of nuances cities may have in their choices.
So let's jump in. If we were in this car, guys, almost a Rorschach test. What do you see in this picture? Is this a middle class neighborhood? And we could capture the same street by day and night. Are there nuances here that I'm not even seeing? What does what does the AI spit out that researchers can use as an explanatory variable?
Um, yeah, so one of the big things you'd see in this picture, so first of all, this picture is from our suppliers. So I'm going to give them a shout out. So this is Carnegie Robotics out of Pittsburgh. And so I've been to Pittsburgh once to meet Randy Welsh, my old advisor, and once to visit Carnegie. So I can't actually tell you. I assume this is a middle class neighborhood. It looks pretty good to me. This is actually a freeze frame of a video. In some of these, you'll actually see vacant lots. This is a minute long. They drive by vacant lots, empty lots, tons of graffiti. And so once you kind of aggregate that up across the city, you can see like, well, here's where every vacant lawn is, or excuse me, lot is in the city, things like that. In this case, I don't see anything super glaring. In fact, in this, it may be the lack of things. So I see, to Pittsburgh's credit, a freshly asphalted road. Right? That's pretty wild, especially being in San Diego here. We don't see that ever. Um, and the windows look good. And the cars on the side of the road look pretty reasonable. What you do see a little bit here, which again is an easy remedy, is over on the left panel, the left third panel. You can actually see a little bit of litter on the sidewalk there. So that's one of those things that actually Anya is really interested in trying to remedy these kind of micro things using some field experiments.
So let's talk about that. Anya, a two-part question. How long, for how many months have you guys been up and going in how many cities? And you're one of the world's leading young experts on field experiments. We don't have enough field experiments in urban economics. How could you use this as a laboratory for your own research?
Sure. So I've been interested in generating my own data for a really long time. I started doing my PhD doing lab experiments where you bring students into a lab and ask them very abstract questions. And then I spent the rest of my career doing field experiments where you go out and you actually put people in different settings or give people different messages and try to see how they behave to try to understand behavior and try to understand how to improve outcomes for people. And I get bored easily, so I can't just work in health my whole life, and I can't just work in philanthropy, and I can't just work in early education, even though these have been areas where I've published a lot. So when I started talking to Erik about urban economics, what struck me as really interesting is we don't have great reliable data on the built environment. So we don't really know what kinds of buildings people are living in. We don't know what kinds of streets are walking down, like is there trash on the street or not? And we can't really run interventions and try to see outcomes without outcome data. And so this provides the cleanest possible outcome data for all sorts of potential interventions that we might run. And I did some built environment work actually with Shlisha Datar at USC when I was there. So we were looking at how changing your in public housing projects, how improving the quality of the housing affects health outcomes. It was an NIH funded project, but there this was focused on one property. Here you could imagine using this property data as just one indication of quality of life for people. You could imagine interventions in which what cities really care about is improving the city. They don't really want to be in the business of fining everybody in the city and giving them fines and tickets because that makes the cities have this dual problem they want to solve. One is they want the city to be clean, and two is they want their citizens to be happy. So fining 100,000 people is not the way to do it. We could think about notices that we send to people and say, hey, look, this month we're focused on, cars in front lawns. Could you please remove your car? Maybe we'll enter you in a lottery to win a gift card if you move your car, and then we can easily get outcome measures of whether you did it or not. We can use the data to figure out who to target. Otherwise, it's kind of impossible even to know where to start. So this kind of data really should open the door to many, many types of interventions that should improve cities and ultimately, I think, improve mental health and physical health. People will be outside more if their streets are cleaner and they don't have to walk by vacant, scary
I
looking
think that
vacant
that's
lots.
terrific. When I taught at Johns Hopkins, the Bloomberg Foundation was sponsoring Love My Block. And so this was, I believe it was a social capital asking residents, even if they're renters, to take pride in their block. And so if there was a block with litter, of how you nudge people without a Singaporean fine to engage and provide public goods and to avoid what we economists call the free rider problem. So, Anya, any thoughts? You've done some terrific work on nudging. Would the same nudges to eat a healthier diet, do you think they'd be effective in encouraging people to work together to reduce litter? Or are we going to need a whole different set of social incentives to beautify and improve quality of life in cities?
So there have been, in my experience, two types of interventions that have worked really well, and then a bunch that haven't. So I think education tends not to work so well, even though that's the first thing we think of. But it doesn't seem to be education that's the problem. Incentives work very well. So we had this old study where we gave kids a prize if they selected the healthy snack, and we increased healthy snack choice from 20% up to 80%, which is a huge treatment effect. But incentives always work. So incentivizing people for cleaning up their neighborhood would be very effective. And I think Erik and I talked about this before. It's like, why do we keep fining people? Why don't we just reward them instead for good behavior, right? Like you went the speed limit, you get to be entered in a lottery for a prize, as opposed to, you went over the speed limit, now you're penalized. So that'd be really interesting. That's costly though. I don't know who would fund it, maybe Bloomberg, but without incentives, I think the other type of intervention that's really effective is social norms and peer effect. So if people see that others have cleaned up, it should encourage them to clean up. And that's a really interesting question, is how does blight spread, and also how does the cleanliness spread? So what do we know about the spillover effects of cleaning up one block and then looking at the effect of the block next to it? And Erik and I tried to do some of this work last year with the city, but ultimately didn't have the cameras ready to do a good job that we'd like to do. And so
And
the
Anya,
idea
in
would
which
be to intervene by cleaning up part of a block and then looking at the effect on the other part of the block. That'd be an interesting spillover kind of experiment.
I think that's brilliant. A cliche. It takes two to tango. While you guys are just starting out, are there cities who have chief innovation officers who are eager to meet with you? Or are some of these cities, they are cities, do you predict that cities will be eager to work with you? Or do some cities just want to keep with business as usual? Or do city leaders know that they could do better? How optimistic are you about cities' incentives to raise their game?
Yeah, talk about that.
Yeah, sure. Um, yeah, so actually, it's a great question. Um, I think the honest truth here is right now, just what's going on in cities. We see in Minnesota, people are a little skeptical of cities and surveillance. I think this is actually one of the keys with the field experiments and trying to be focused on outcomes and improvements rather than looking at this as mass like data collection. Cities seem to be really, really excited to uh, especially when they've rolling out new stuff and showing gains to be able to actually put outcome measures on those things. So, for instance, Atlanta's doing a bunch of graffiti stuff. They've got graffiti teams driving around and cleaning up. Measuring that sort of thing is extremely exciting because it's kind of hard to say like, oh, we've got this graffiti team out there, but okay, what have they done, right? And this is a way to measure it. The second reason cities are really excited about this is they spend a lot of money on interventions already. For example, Birmingham, Alabama, goes out and they contract out people to mow vacant lots. And we know overgrown vacant lots are a really big problem. There's been research actually up in Philly about this and how much it hurts children's outcomes in school and health outcomes. It's pretty wild. Just an overgrown vacant lot. Kids don't like to walk by it, so they don't like to go to school. And being able to hold those contractors accountable without having a city worker driving around and make sure the contractors did their job is a great thing. So in terms of enforcing government efficiency, it can be really, really nice. And I think when the city's paying to get something done, being able to hold those accountable that they hired to do it is a really attractive. So they
So
seem excited. They seem excited.
I love it. Guys, a genuine question, because one of the reasons I want to meet is I think there's tremendous research potential with the platform you're building. And I wanted to brainstorm on tape to show my mother that I can still think on my feet. Anya, if you guys are driving your cars in city neighborhoods where crime is declining. And that can be documented using geocoded police data, which we can talk about. Am I right that your cameras might pick up that there's more nightlife? That in the 1970s, when I was in New York City, people were afraid to go out at night because of crime. I want to run that experiment in reverse. I want to say something optimistic at the tender age of 60. If there is a neighborhood in a city that used to be a tough neighborhood, but crime is declining in that neighborhood, would your cameras, can you walk me through the AI of how the cameras would pick up that nightlife is accelerating on those blocks?
I mean, one of the big things would just be looking at counts of people out, right? So you can actually look at changes in pedestrian counts. And it's interesting to talk about night lights as an urban environmental economist, right? We know there's all the satellite lights and trying to, pick up economic activity through cameras already, just through satellite cameras. And in this way, you could do the exact same thing, just driving through the street at night. There's some real big advantages to night driving for us as well. For instance, the refractivity of street signs actually really matters. This is a hard thing to measure, but if you're driving through the city at night with an IR camera, you can actually get really good measures of that as well. So there's all sorts of reasons to drive through the city at night, and in terms of as somebody who's done a lot of research with Street View data. And I was one of the reasons I started this was Street View data got really expensive, and it was kind of it was like the frog in the the boiling pot. It just I wanted to write all these papers using images, and it just got more and more expensive. And eventually, I jumped out and I started taking my own pictures. But I think one of the really interesting things that we can do is share this data with academics and use it for research. And I think as academics, for the most part, we're really excited to make impacts in society. And I think this is a place where I'm sure there's a young academic who's doing a PhD right now that would love to get their hands on this data and do something cool with it. And, we'd love to be able to, help with that.
Where I see a niche for you guys, and I'm going to want you to answer the same question, is foundations like the Ford Foundation and the Bloomberg Foundation give billions to cities. And in the past, cynics like me used to say there's good intentions. And Anya, you guys alluded to this, but are there outcomes? Without being your press agent, and I have no financial stake in what you guys are up to, it strikes me that you guys are creating a terrific laboratory for measuring value added in cities. With that softball question, can you line that up? Of it strikes me that you have a unique ability to figure out what works and in cities, and that's crucial for reducing cynicism about inefficiency and waste in public spending.
That's right. So I think if we're thinking about public spending, let's think about kind of a really basic example. But one thing I always find annoying is cities where they don't have enough public trash cans, so trash is spilling out. And I always think, why can't the city optimize how many trash bins it has on the street? So imagine a really simple intervention in which you collect pre-data. So you drive by, you figure out how much trash is on the streets, whether the bin is overflowing, and then you intervene on every other block. You add an extra trash can, and you come back a week later, you do the same test, and you can really show, look at, we've spent this much money on these extra trash bins, and the result was that we reduced litter by this amount. And that's a really clear, quantifiable effect because you could count the litter, you could figure out the size of the litter. You could have all sorts of quantifiable things. And it's similar to kind of Erik was talking about Atlanta having a graffiti team. Let's say you applied for a grant to have a graffiti team. Well, okay, great. There's a graffiti team. You're still getting 311 calls. There's still graffiti. The team doesn't really know where to go. They're kind of reacting ad hoc, like going here and there. But imagine you could say, look, before the grant, this is what the graffiti looked like. Now we've gotten the grant, we've employed the team, they work 40 hours a week. And now this is the outcome. So it's a really clear way to measure any type of city intervention that you might imagine, which I think is really nice and should become kind of the standard now. So if I'm a funder, I give money to the city, but only if they can actually show me not just what they did, but what the outcome was. I think it's a really, really powerful for that.
So I think if you guys are willing to do a second video with me, maybe we want to get very nitty-gritty on a set of these interventions. And then, eh, Erik, if I can ask a slight proprietary question, we can turn off the Zoom if I make you uncomfortable. Is the marginal cost for you guys declining of you're not a pizza firm. How do you incur? Is it costly to take these pictures? How do you burn through money? And as you become more of an expert, is the quality of what you're doing rising and the marginal cost is declining? Or am I making up stuff?
No, you're absolutely right. We That's a great proprietary question. Yeah, I would say one of the big things that we've noticed over time is actually investing that in the fixed cost of getting good cameras and high quality GPS is actually really, really important. So you ask about data quality, for instance, knowing where exactly the camera is in space is incredibly important. Because if you know where the camera is in space, you know what direction the camera is facing, you know which property it is, you know which parcel it is, you know whose tree that is. We've actually made a big investment recently in this GPS technology, which is actually just as costly as all three cameras. So we have pinpoint like centimeter accuracy on GPS. That actually saves a lot of money in post-processing, right? We don't have to like do all sorts of crazy algorithms to try to figure out where stuff is in space and run it through a bunch of AI. AI is a solution for everything, but it's expensive. And so, just kind of going back to the roots and making a big investment in hardware, I think is going to scale really nicely for us. In the long run, these cameras do have 3D depth as well, so you can kind of get a kind of a LiDAR almost feel of where stuff is, and so we can say like, here's exact lat and longitude of that tree, or that house or that car. So those investments have been great for us, and the work with Carnegie Robotics is kind of the next step there is to decrease the size of the unit, be able to put it on other vehicles and scale them quickly and have a lot of stuff out there. So, without going too deep into it, I think we've got a really incredible and exciting roadmap to get cameras all over the country relatively quickly. That should be really, we shouldn't have to raise a ton of money for. And I am really excited about it. And it's really hard for me not to talk all about it. So I'm just going to say that I'll say that, but
No, you
we're in a
handled
great
that
spot right now. Yeah.
half fastball.
Yeah.
Folks, I have two last questions for today. One a nerdy one and one a whatever's the opposite of nerdy. Have any cities done their own diagnostics? So cities have more and more data about themselves. Have they noticed where they have too much trash in the city and then have asked you to drive your cars there to keep a look? Is it your goal to have a random sample of a city like Los Angeles or to oversample in areas where the mayor is very concerned about? Or do you do one for research, representative sample, and another for a mayor with a very practical question of what's going on in Compton or Brentwood?
We're just talking about that for New York City.
I was gonna say it's
We're gonna say the city. I'm sorry. No, we've been talking to some people in New York City about this idea of trying to identify where the trash is and really show that they're doing a good job cleaning up the trash. So we have been talking about this idea that trash piles up really fast, especially in these big cities. And how do you identify where the trash is? Usually you use the 311 calls, and which are very kind of
My mother's always
inconsistent.
calling about a squirrel in Central Park that she saw. But that
Exactly, right?
oversamples people like my mommy.
Yeah, so instead of always answering the call from the one person that's got the one problem, you're going around and treating everything more equally. But this other question of going into lower income in neighborhoods versus higher income, I actually think both the research and the mayor care a lot about these underserved areas, and so it's the incentives are aligned there. A lot of research that I've done has been in areas like Compton, actually, and looking at food choice and health outcomes, and now turning around and looking at built environment and how that's associated with health is really important in those types of areas. Definitely.
Yeah, if I can just jump on your comment, Matt, which I really like about your mother-in-law. There was when I first started working with City of Tuscaloosa, they gave me access to their raw 311 data, including who was making the calls. And so without, getting into micro detail about what it was, there was one person on there who had called 311 over a 10-year period. I don't know, you care to take a guess? Like how many times could one person call 311?
So I would guess 10 times a day. I got to say 3,000 times a year, 30,000 times.
You're the first person ever to overestimate it. It's 9,000. But yes, it's astounding. And so what it was this guy who was driving to work every day, commuting, and anything he saw, from a pothole to a street light that took too long to a stray dog to a broken window, he would call 311 three times. And the city responds to all these things equally. And so I was doing the thought experiment like, first, what's wrong with this guy? But the second thought experiment was like, what about being the guy who commutes behind him? Like all of a sudden the city's looking better and better. And this guy to me became like kind of a superhero, like he's totally obsessed with making the city better. And I kind of shared that energy with him. The second person was about, I think, 7,000 times. And that was actually a real estate agent in the low income part of Tuscaloosa, the West End. And anytime she put a house up for sale, she'd call about every property in a 6 block radius, about everything on it. And so she'd try to transform the community to try to get the capitalization effects into that housing sale. So
Smart lady.
yeah, I was like, this woman's brilliant. And so I learned a lot from those two people. One was, you know, you, if you're just going to be reactive to 311, you're going to oversample with that guy's commute. And secondly, in low income areas, it really matters, right? This is a place where people don't have a lot of wealth generation. And if you do own a house, any marginal increase in it, right, is going to go straight to like intergenerational wealth building, income building. So to follow up with Anya, I think that's a really exciting thing is to try to change places through capitalization effects, which is, kind of near and dear to the heart.
So, folks, I want to wrap up with something corny and then give you a chance to make a plug. So, for each of you, why are you a good intellectual team? What does the other bring to the party here in trying to build something great?
Can I go first?
Sure.
So Anya's an adult.
What?
Anya can like actually put stuff together and follow through with it and put a really compelling grant together and tell a story in a really, really wonderful way. And so I think that's one of the things I've seen working with her is just a lot of uh, creativity with follow through, which, as an academic, you usually get one of those two things and find a co-author for the other. So that's been, yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah, so Eric's kind of the genius that started doing AI before it was called AI and there was any AI. So he has a ton of insight into how all this works and how to run it. And that's been really interesting to learn about. And he also has a lot of insight into cities and how they should look and what it all means. So that's been really interesting to get into the field of urban through him.
So, as we wrap up, let's wrap up where we started. So, I was feeling sorry for myself as an old man, and almost like that Bruce Springsteen song, Glory Days, was going back to when Glazer and I were typing in stuff. Uh, you guys creating this real-time data, bringing about accountability in cities and an ability to measure value added of specific projects. Guys, don't undersell what you're building. What else would you say? Give us a summary of what makes you proud of what you're building here and what it might be 5 years from now.
So I think from my perspective, the thing that really makes me proud about this is, as you mentioned at the start, just getting high frequency data, right? And as an academic who wasn't in a place where I had a lot of research funds, to be able to kind of generate this data myself and have unfettered access to it, and then share this data with other people that can help solve city problems, that's what I'm really proud about and really excited about. So. The second thing I'm really excited about is wanting to solve urban problems, doing urban economics because I cared about cities, and then finding out about, how we could use field experiments to do this stuff, is really, really cool. So I'm really excited to use this data for good and to use this data to help solve a lot of city problems and hopefully find some little, I mean, I hate to say nudges, but you know, we always talk about nudges and that you get these small behavioral effects, but are there some small behavioral effects that maybe through externalities, through network effects can kind of blow up and really have big impacts in cities? So I'm excited to kind of see where that goes in the next 5 years and actually have something to say. And maybe there's something magic that we can find to solve these problems in cities.
Yeah, the final word, or that
I
was that.
it's hard to say anything after that answer, but I think another part of this for me that's magic is we're kind of creating an entirely new market. So if you think about giving cities these images, they can use these in the various ways we've discussed, but these images can be used in many different types of industries. So we can think about insurance or real estate, and these people who've normally relied on manual data collection. We've talked to people that do manual data collection to look at the quality of electrical poles. Now imagine having this data at your fingertips. You don't have to go out, you don't have to send someone out for months and months to look at these poles. It really creates a lot of efficiencies and can create new types of businesses and a new market for this kind of data. So it's the first data of its kind, really. So
And
that's really
And if I
exciting.
can plug one thing, it's we've done a little work with insurance on resilience using this, especially as far as roofs. So if you need any data, you know, we're here.
So it strikes me that maybe next time, if we do this again, we should focus on the private sector of
Exactly.
opportunities. So there's always the cliches of where another Starbucks should open. But if there was a tornado in a Kentucky that I'm studying, and if we drove one of your cars through, have all the roofs in a half-mile radius taken the same hit, and of just ways to aggregate information to see the shock. And so, guys, thank you. This was fun for me. I've got a birthday coming up, so this is your birthday present to me, and I'm going to share this with my mother. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.